Hi, and welcome to the channel. Here we share stories that touch the soul. Enjoy listening.
The first thing that went wrong was the wreath. I had specifically told the driver not to hang one on the front door. No wreaths, no lights, no mistletoe lurking like a loaded weapon. I was paying obscene money for solitude, not a Hallmark ambush. And yet there it was when the car rolled to a stop, green, fat, aggressively cheerful, nailed to my door like a festive accusation. "So much for invisible," I muttered, stepping out into the snow. The house stood exactly as I remembered it from the glossy photos, all glass and stone, crouched on the edge of the mountain like it had something to hide. I bought it 6 months earlier during a bout of insomnia and mild contempt for my children. A few signatures, a wire transfer that could have funded a small country, and suddenly I owned a place designed for people who didn't plan on being found. Perfect for Christmas. I'm 71 years old, a self-made millionaire, and, according to my family, impossible to shop for. According to me, I was just tired. Tired of the polite interrogations disguised as dinners. Tired of my son's well-meaning lies, my daughter's meaningful silences, and the way everyone got sentimental around December like it was mandatory. So I fled. I bought myself a quiet Christmas. Or rather, I tried to. Inside, the house smelled like pine and money. Someone had lit the fireplace. Someone had stocked the fridge. Someone had ignored my very clear instructions about decorations, because a tree stood in the living room, tall and smug, wearing white lights that blinked like they knew something I didn't. I stood there for a full minute, coat still on, staring at it. "All right," I said to the tree. "We're not friends." The third-person version of me, the one an outsider might see, was a tall old man with silver hair and a straight back, standing alone in a luxury mountain home, arguing quietly with a Christmas tree. He looked composed. He looked expensive. He did not look like someone whose carefully planned solitude was about to collapse. I poured myself a drink. Whiskey. Neat. The kind of drink you have when you don't plan on explaining anything to anyone. The plan was simple: 3 days. No calls. No visits. No emotional accounting. I'd read, sleep, walk in the snow, maybe write a few letters I'd never send. I was very good at not sending things. That's when the knock came. It wasn't loud. That was the problem. Loud knocks announce themselves. They demand attention. This one was polite, almost apologetic, as if it already knew it was unwelcome. I didn't move. The house was big enough to swallow the sound. Whoever it was would assume I wasn't home and leave. The knock came again. I sighed, set the glass down, and went to the door, rehearsing the speech in my head. Something concise. Something expensive sounding. "No, I'm not interested. No, I don't celebrate. No, I won't donate to your cause, religious or otherwise." I opened the door and everything slid slightly out of place. She stood there holding a cardboard box, snow dusting her coat, hair pulled back in a way that suggested she had given up on impressing anyone about 20 minutes earlier. Late 40s, maybe early 50s. Sharp eyes. Familiar posture. She smiled like we'd spoken yesterday. "Merry Christmas, Daniel." No one calls me Daniel unless they've known me long enough to hurt me. For a brief, deeply undignified second, I considered pretending to be someone else. A caretaker. A ghost. The wreath. "Claire," I said, because my mouth has never listened to my brain. The box tipped slightly in her hands. "I was hoping it was you." I wasn't hoping exactly. But when the caretaker said someone was finally using the house, her voice trailed off into the cold, where old sentences go to die. Claire Harper. The woman I had loved in my 40s. The woman I had not married. The woman who, according to my memory, had left town after a fight about money, pride, and the kind of future that refuses to be negotiated. The woman I had not seen in over 20 years. "What are you doing here?" I asked. She glanced behind her, at the dark stretch of road, the falling snow. Long story. Of course it was. I should have closed the door. I should have wished her a careful, polite holiday and retreated back into my very expensive loneliness. Instead, I noticed her hands shaking slightly around the box. "What's in the box?" I asked. She laughed, a short sound. "Leftovers. I volunteer at the shelter down the mountain. We had more food than people tonight. I was told there was a house up here with lights on and a man who didn't need charity but might accept it anyway." I stared at her. Then, against all available evidence, I stepped aside. "Come in," I said. "It's cold." That was the gesture. The small one. The one you don't think matters. The door closed behind her with a sound that felt final. Inside, the warmth softened her features. She took off her coat, hesitated when she saw the tree. "Didn't picture you with lights," she said. "I didn't picture me with guests." She smiled, but her eyes moved, cataloging the room. The fireplace. The art. The kind of furniture that doesn't forgive spills. Money was still loud around me. It always had been. "I won't stay," she said quickly. "I just wanted to, well, say hello. And drop this off." She set the box on the counter. The smell of roasted vegetables and herbs filled the room, inconveniently human. We stood there, two people pretending this was normal. In the third person telling, this would be the moment when the old millionaire realizes his past has arrived uninvited, carrying food and unfinished business. He would smile ruefully. He would make a joke. I did make a joke. It just wasn't very good. "So," I said, "do you deliver betrayal with dessert, or is that extra?" She looked at me, really looked, and something unreadable crossed her face. "Daniel," she said softly, "if I wanted to hurt you, I wouldn't have come empty-handed." The irony sat between us, heavy and amused. I poured a second glass of whiskey. Then, without asking, a third. I handed one to her. She took it. Outside, snow kept falling, committed and quiet. Inside, the Christmas tree blinked again, patient as a witness. And somewhere between the wreath I hadn't wanted and the woman I hadn't expected, I felt the first crack in the perfect silence I'd purchased. It sounded expensive. Claire didn't drink the whiskey right away. She held the glass like it was something fragile, something that might explain itself if she waited long enough. "I shouldn't," she said. "I'm driving." "You're driving down a mountain in a snowstorm on Christmas Eve," I replied. At this point, whiskey is harm reduction. That earned a real smile. The kind that reaches the eyes before permission is granted. She took a small sip, winced, then exhaled. "Still terrible," she said. "Still effective," I answered. We moved into the living room without discussing it, like gravity handled the decision. She sat on the edge of the sofa, posture careful, as if the furniture might accuse her of trespassing. I took the armchair across from her, the one positioned to look thoughtful even when you're panicking quietly. The third-person version of this scene would describe tension. Unresolved history. Two former lovers boxed in by memory and overpriced decor. It would miss the smaller, stranger thing happening beneath it all. We were both listening for something to break first. "I didn't know you lived up here," she said, gesturing vaguely at the walls. "Last I heard, you hated mountains." "I hated expectations," I said. "The mountains were collateral damage." She nodded like that made sense. With Claire it often did. A pause stretched. The fire crackled, shamelessly romantic. I made a mental note to fire the caretaker in the spring. "So," I said. "Shelter volunteer." "Part-time," she replied. "Full-time disappointment to my mother." "Impressive longevity." She shrugged. "I teach. Community college. Literature. Romantic irony, mostly." I laughed before I could stop myself. "That feels personal." "It usually is." She looked around again, slower this time, taking in the house not as a statement but as a habitat. "You really want it to be alone," she said. "I still do," I lied. Another pause. This one heavier. "Why are you here, Claire?" I asked. "Really?" She stared into her glass, swirling the amber like she was reading tea leaves designed for men who never learn. "I didn't plan this," she said. "I swear. I moved back 2 years ago. My sister's sick. The shelter's understaffed. Life did that thing where it rearranges itself when you're not looking. And the house." Her jaw tightened just slightly. Until I remembered too well. "I live 10 minutes down the mountain," she said. "Rental. Cheap. Drafty. Smells like wet dog no matter what I do." "You hate dogs." "I know." I waited. Silence, when used correctly, is an investment strategy. "I knew the house was yours," she added. "Eventually. People talk. Your name still makes noise." "That wasn't an invitation." "No," she agreed. "It wasn't." She finally looked at me then, really looked, and there it was, that familiar mixture of defiance and apology, like she was always ready to argue but never sure she deserved to win. I came because I thought you might be alone, she said. And because I remembered you never cooked. I've learned, I protested weakly, gesturing toward the untouched kitchen. I can order things. She laughed, quick and sharp. You could always order things. People, too. The jab landed. Clean. Deserve. Is this the part where we rehash everything? I asked. Because I only bought enough solitude for one man. No, she said. This is the part where I tell you I didn't leave because of the money. I leaned back. There it was. The gift under the tree I hadn't asked for. Claire, I said carefully. It's been 22 years, she cut in. And you've been wrong about me for 22 years. I studied her face. The lines time had drawn not as damage but as punctuation. I wondered briefly if I'd ever known her at all or if I'd just filled in the blanks with confidence. You chose your future, I said. I chose mine. You chose your pride, she said. And I chose not to compete with it. We stared at each other, two old fighters circling a ring they'd sworn they were done with. In a more dramatic story, this would be the moment of confession. Tears. Raised voices. Maybe a kiss fueled by nostalgia and poor judgment. Instead, there was another knock at the door. Claire flinched. I frowned. I told everyone I was unreachable, I said. Maybe they didn't listen, she replied. The knock came again. Louder this time. Confident. Familiar in a way that made my stomach tighten. I stood, every joint protesting the idea of surprise guests. Stay here. She rose too, because of course she did. Claire never stayed put when something was about to go wrong. I opened the door. My son stood there, snow on his shoulders, jaw set in that way he got from me when he was preparing to be reasonable and fail. Dad, he said. We need to talk. Behind him, partially shielded by his coat, was a woman. Young. Beautiful. Dark hair pulled back. A face I had last seen in photographs on my phone, tagged in holidays I hadn't attended. My daughter-in-law. The third-person narrator would note the symmetry. The past in my living room. The present on my doorstep. The future waiting to be set on fire. Daniel? My son said, confused by my silence. Aren't you going to invite us in? Behind me, I felt Claire step closer. The Christmas tree blinked again. Somewhere deep in my chest, something laughed. My son has always had terrible timing. He was born during a market crash, announced his engagement at his sister's divorce party, and now, apparently, arrived at my carefully purchased isolation with his wife and unresolved tension gift-wrapped in snowfall. Dad, he repeated. You look surprised. That was one word for it. Others queued up behind it, shoving and impatient. I stepped aside. Because I'm polite. Because I'm curious. Because part of me wanted to see how badly this could go. Come in, I said, my voice steady in a way that suggested I was lying to myself with professional skill. They entered, bringing the cold with them. My daughter-in-law, Emily, smiled first. She always did. A weaponized smile. Bright, harmless, designed to make you feel like the unreasonable one before you'd even spoken. Daniel, she said warmly. Merry Christmas. I noticed she didn't hug me. Progress. Behind them, the door closed. Behind me, Claire existed. That's the thing about rooms with too much history. They develop pressure. One more body and something starts to crack. Emily, I said. I wasn't expecting company. That makes 4 of us, she replied lightly, glancing around. Her eyes landed on Claire. They stayed there a second too long. My son followed her gaze, turned, and frowned. Who's this? Claire didn't wait for an introduction. She never liked being framed by other people's sentences. Claire, she said, extending a hand. I brought food. Emily's smile sharpened. How festive. I watched this like a tennis match played by professionals who hated each other. The politeness. The subtext. The pauses doing more work than words. We thought you'd be alone, my son said to me, quietly. You weren't answering your phone. I paid good money for that, I said. He exhaled through his nose. A habit from childhood when he was trying not to argue. We came to talk. Emily and I. On Christmas Eve, I noted. It seemed appropriate, Emily said. Family and all. Claire raised an eyebrow. I almost smiled. We migrated, again without discussion, into the living room. 4 people, 4 glasses. Whiskey all around, except Emily, who declined with a hand on her stomach that suggested either restraint or strategy. The tree blinked. still smug. So, I said, once everyone was seated in positions that felt accidental but weren't. Who wants to go first? No one spoke. In the third-person version, the camera would pull back. It would show the old millionaire patriarch, the loyal son, the beautiful wife, and the woman from the past. It would hum with significance. What it wouldn't show was how tired I suddenly felt. Not physically, existentially. Like I'd been called into a meeting I hadn't scheduled. We didn't come to fight, my son said finally. We came because Emily's been getting messages. Claire's head tilted slightly. A cat noticing movement. Messages? I echoed. Emily nodded carefully. From someone I don't know. Anonymous, mostly. About Daniel. I laughed. It escaped before I could stop it. I have an entire industry built on people talking about me. These are personal, she said. Things about you. About your past. About women. Claire shifted. Just enough to register. And you thought, I said slowly, that Christmas Eve was the right moment to discuss my romantic resume. Emily leaned forward. One woman in particular keeps coming up. I looked at Claire. She looked back at me, her expression unreadable, like a locked drawer you're not sure you want to open. What kind of messages? My son asked his wife. Emily hesitated. For the first time since she'd entered, her smile faltered. Warnings. The word landed poorly. Warnings about what? I asked. About patterns, she said. About men who buy their silence. About money used as leverage. About women who disappear when it becomes inconvenient. Claire stood up. I think I should go, she said calmly. This feels familial. No, I said too quickly. Everyone looked at me. I cleared my throat. If someone's spreading stories about me, I'd prefer to hear them in the room. Emily studied me. Then Claire. Then my son, who was staring at the floor like it might rescue him. The messages said, Emily continued, that you ruin people quietly. That you don't cheat, you replace. And that the women you leave behind tend to need help later. Claire laughed. It wasn't kind. That's creative, she said. Did they mention his excellent posture? Emily turned to her. Did you send them? No, Claire replied. If I wanted to warn you, I'd do it to your face. I winced. Not because it was cruel. Because it was accurate. Then who? My son asked. Silence again. Thicker now. I leaned back, the leather chair sighing under me like it knew secret. I think, I said, that someone is rewriting my life with better punctuation. Emily's voice softened. Daniel, are they wrong? That was the question. The real one. Hanging there, fragile and sharp. Before I could answer, Claire spoke. He didn't ruin me, she said. He just didn't choose me. Emily turned, surprised. You're older than you expected? Claire offered. Yes. Time does that. My son finally looked up. You knew my dad. I loved your dad, Claire said. No drama. No apology. Just fact. Emily inhaled. Slowly. Processing. And you live nearby, she said. Yes. And you came here tonight. Yes. To bring food, Emily added. Yes. Emily nodded, absorbing it like data she hadn't budgeted for. So this is what happens, she said quietly. The past just shows up. I thought of the wreath, the knock, the gesture. Sometimes, I said, it's invited by accident. Emily stood. I need air, she said. And honesty. Preferably in that order. She walked toward the door. My son followed, torn, glancing back at me like a boy waiting for permission he wouldn't get. They stepped outside into the snow. The house exhaled. Claire sat back down. Well, she said. That went better than expected. You have a very optimistic definition of better, I replied. She looked at me, something softer breaking through. You never were good at consequences. No, I agreed. But I've always been excellent at timing. Outside, voices rose. Not shouting. Something worse. Controlled pain. Inside, the tree blinked again. And for the first time that night, I wondered if the messages weren't meant for Emily at all, but for me. The truth, apparently, had RSVP'd. I've learned over the years that when people go outside to talk in the snow, they're not trying to cool down. They're trying to avoid witnesses. Through the glass wall, I watched my son pace. Emily stood still, arms folded, chin lifted in that way that suggested she was choosing her words like weapons she might not end up using. Snow gathered on their shoulders, indifferent and thorough. Claire followed my gaze. You want to intervene, she said. I want to fake a heart attack, I replied. Less paperwork. She smiled faintly, then grew serious. Those messages, she said. They weren't wrong. Just incomplete. That sentence did something unpleasant to my chest. Incomplete how? I asked. She looked at the fire instead of me. They make it sound like you planned it. Like you engineered people's lives. You didn't. You just moved forward. And anyone who couldn't keep up was left standing in the same place, watching your taillights. That's a poetic way of saying I'm selfish. That's an accurate way of saying you're efficient. I laughed despite myself. Claire always had a talent for reframing sins as virtues without absolving them. Outside, Emily gestured sharply. My son stopped pacing. I never meant to hurt anyone, I said. Claire nodded. Most people don't. That's why it works. Silence settled between us again, but this one was different. Less defensive. Like two veterans sitting on the same side of a war they'd both lost differently. Why now? I asked. Why show up tonight? She finally looked at me. Really looked. Because I needed to see if you were still you. And, she considered, you are. Just better furniture. I took that as a compliment. The door opened. Cold rushed in. My son entered first, face flushed, jaw tight. Emily followed, composed but pale, her smile completely gone now, like it had been an accessory she'd set aside. We're staying the night, my son said. Not a request. The roads are bad, Emily added. And we need time. Time. The most expensive thing in the room, and somehow I was still expected to provide it. Of course, I said. Guest rooms are down the hall. Pick one that doesn't judge you. Emily gave a short, humorless laugh. Progress. As they walked away, she stopped, turned back to Claire. You said you loved him, Emily said. Yes. Past tense. Claire smiled sadly. Love doesn't really do tense. It just changes jobs. Emily studied her for a long moment, then nodded once and followed my son down the corridor. When they were gone, the house felt bigger, emptier, like it was waiting for instructions. Claire stood. I really should go. I didn't argue. That worried me. I'll walk you out, I said. We stopped at the door. The wreath loomed between us, green and ridiculous. You always hated symbols, she said. I prefer liabilities, I replied. She hesitated. Daniel, whatever happens with them, this isn't about revenge. Or closure. Or unfinished business. No. This is about whether you're finally ready to sit with the mess instead of buying your way around it. I opened the door. Snow fell quietly, like it had no opinion. Careful, I said. That almost sounded like wisdom. She smiled, then leaned in and kissed my cheek. Soft. Familiar. Final in a way that wasn't cruel. Good night, she said. Goodbye, I answered. She walked down the path, her figure dissolving into white and dark until she was just another memory with good posture. I closed the door and leaned against it longer than necessary. Upstairs, I heard movement. A door opening. Then another. The house rearranging itself around new truth. The third-person narrator would say this is where the old man reflects. Regrets. Redemption. Lessons learned under twinkling lights. That narrator would be wrong. What I felt was calculation. Emily was smart. Curious. Dangerous in the way people are when they believe they're protecting themselves. The messages had rattled her not because they accused me, but because they suggested a future where she might be replaceable. My son loved her. That was obvious. Love makes people reckless. It also makes them blind. And then there was the small detail no one had said out loud yet. The messages hadn't stopped. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls. 2 voicemails. 1 new text, unknown number. Merry Christmas, Daniel. Funny who shows up when you finally try to be alone. I deleted it. Immediately. Like that ever helps. I poured another whiskey and sat in the armchair, listening to the house breathe. Somewhere upstairs, my son and his wife were negotiating their version of the truth. Somewhere down the mountain, Claire was driving carefully, carrying a past she'd refused to weaponize. And somewhere else, closer than I liked, someone was watching the pieces move. I raised my glass to the blinking tree. Next move, I said softly. It blinked back, patient as ever. I woke up to the sound of someone crying quietly in a house that was never designed for echoes. For a moment, I did what I've done my entire adult life when faced with emotional noise. I assumed it was someone else's problem. Then consciousness finished booting up, and I remembered where I was, who was upstairs, and how badly I'd failed at buying silence. The crying stopped just as I reached the hallway. Emily's door was closed. My son's too. Whatever had happened overnight had already calcified into something private and sharp. In the kitchen, the caretaker, Mark, mid-50s, polite in the way men are when they know you can fire them with a sentence, was making coffee like he'd always lived here. "You weren't scheduled," I said. He didn't flinch. "Roads were bad. Thought you'd want the driveway cleared before it iced." I looked outside. Perfectly plowed. Of course it was. "You ever hear the phrase, 'do not disturb'?" I asked. "Yes, sir," he said. "I also hear my phone when it rings." That was interesting. "Who called you?" He hesitated. "A rookie move." "Someone worried," he said. "About you being alone." I poured coffee I didn't want. "People worry about me when they want something." He nodded. "That's usually how it works." Emily entered then, pale but composed, hair pulled back too tightly, like she'd slept poorly and dressed with intention. She accepted a mug without looking at me. "Morning," I said. "Is it?" she replied. "Fair." My son followed, eyes tired, shoulders heavier. He looked older than his years in the way men do when illusions begin to expire. "We need to talk," he said. "Yes," I replied. "We do. But first, Mark, did anyone contact you about me recently? Anonymous messages? Requests?" Mark cleared his throat. "A woman called last week. Said she was an old friend. Asked if you were coming up for the holidays. Said it was important." Emily's head snapped up. "Did she give a name?" He shook his head. "No. Just said she wanted you to face things." The room went quiet in that brittle way that suggests someone has just stepped on the invisible glass floor. "Did she say anything else?" I asked. Mark thought. "She mentioned money. Said you always hid behind it." Emily laughed then. A sharp, humorless sound. "Of course." My son looked between us. "Dad." "I don't know who it is," I said, and for once that was the truth. "But she's very invested in my character development." Emily set her mug down. "The messages came again last night," she said. "After we went to bed." My son stiffened. "You didn't tell me." "I didn't want to ruin Christmas," she said. "More than it already was." She pulled out her phone and slid it across the counter to me. "One message. No number. No signature. Ask him about the woman who took your place before you even arrived." I read it twice. Then a third time, slower. "That doesn't make sense," my son said. "I met you years after." Emily held up a hand. "Let him talk." I appreciated that. Control, when earned, is attractive. "There was someone," I said. "Briefly. Before you met Emily. Before you even knew you were serious." My son frowned. "You never said." "It didn't matter," I said. It ended quickly. Emily watched me. Closely. "Why?" I exhaled. "Because she wanted guarantees I couldn't give. Because she asked what would happen if she needed help. And because I said something unforgivable." Claire's voice echoed in my head. "Efficient." "What did you say?" Emily asked. "I told her I wasn't an insurance policy." Silence. My son closed his eyes. "Dad." "I know." Emily's fingers tightened around her mug. "And did she need help?" "Yes," I said. "Later." "I heard she did." "And you didn't," Emily finished. "No." The third-person narrator would explain context. The market downturn. The logic. The boundaries. He would frame it as a lesson in self-preservation. That narrator would still sound like an asshole. "So," Emily said quietly, "this woman thinks she was replaced. That I was the version who benefited." "That's not," my son began. "It doesn't have to be true," Emily said. "It just has to feel true." She turned to me. "Is there anyone else?" I thought of Claire. The shelter. The box of food. The restraint. "No," I said. "Not like that." Emily nodded slowly. "Then whoever this is, she wants me to see you the way she does." "That's a dangerous hobby," I said. Emily almost smiled. Mark cleared his throat. "Sir." "Yes." "There's a car at the gate. Has been for about 20 minutes. My stomach dropped. I hated it when intuition was right. "Who?" my son asked. Mark shook his head. Can't see clearly from here. She's not coming up. Emily's eyes met mine. She wants you to go to her. Of course she did. I grabbed my coat. I'll handle it. My son stepped forward. Dad. I started this, I said. I'll finish it. Outside, the air was sharp and honest. Down by the gate, a car idled. Oh, practical. The kind of vehicle driven by people who expect disappointment. I walked down, snow crunching underfoot like punctuation. The window rolled down. She was older than I expected. Early 60s. Gray threaded through dark hair. Familiar eyes. I didn't think you'd come, she said. I didn't think you'd wait, I replied. She smiled. Bitter. I've waited most of my life. I leaned against the gate. What do you want? Truth, she said. And maybe an apology I don't need anymore. I nodded. Then let's not waste Christmas. Behind me, the house stood quiet, watching. Inside it, my family waited. And for the first time in decades, I had nowhere else to go. She turned off the engine but didn't get out of the car. That felt deliberate, like she wanted the conversation framed by glass, close enough to see each other clearly, far enough to escape if one of us said the wrong thing. I bent slightly, hands in my coat pockets, suddenly aware of how ridiculous wealth looks from the outside. The house up the hill glowed softly, expensive and patient. The gate between us might as well have been symbolic. People pay consultants for that kind of visual metaphor. You look well, she said. You look prepared, I replied. She smiled at that. A small, tired smile. I had time. Apparently. Her name was Susan. I hadn't said it yet, but it was there, humming between us like a word that didn't want to be spoken first. Susan Miller. The woman who'd come after Claire. The woman I'd dated for 6 months and then erased with the efficiency of a man who mistakes decisiveness for morality. You sent the messages, I said. Yes. You involved my daughter-in-law. Yes. I waited for justification. She didn't offer one. Why? I asked. She leaned her head back against the seat, eyes on the gray morning sky. Because you never listen when it's just you and me. And because I didn't want revenge. I wanted disruption. Same thing, different font. She laughed. A real laugh, unexpectedly warm. Still sharp. Still allergic to responsibility. That's unfair, I said. I'm excellent with responsibility. I just prefer it abstract. She looked at me then, eyes sharp, unamused. You told me you weren't an insurance policy. I nodded. I did. I didn't ask you to save me, she said. I asked if you'd stay. That's worse, I said quietly. I know, she replied. That's why you ran. The truth has a way of showing up without notes or costumes. Just a line, delivered clean. I didn't replace you with Emily, I said. If that's what you think. I don't, she cut in. I think you replace versions of yourself. The women are just scenery. That stung. Because it was elegant. And accurate. So what now? I asked. She turned the key off completely. The car went silent. Now I tell you that I'm fine. I rebuilt. Slowly. Poorly at first. Then better. I don't need your money or your regret. Then why this? I gestured toward the house, the hill, the holiday. Because I wanted you to feel what it's like, she said. To have your present interrupted by the past. To have someone else decide the timing. I considered that. Snow drifted down, light and committed. And Emily? I asked. What did she do to deserve being collateral? Susan sighed. Nothing. But she's smart. She'll see you clearly now. That's not kindness. No, she agreed. It's honesty with sharp edges. I straightened. My knees protested. Aging always chooses inconvenient moments to introduce itself. Are you done? I asked. She nodded. Yes. Then stop, I said. No more messages. No more games. She studied me. And what do I get in return? I thought for a moment. Really thought. You get this, I said. I'm sorry. Not for leaving. Not even for choosing myself. I'm sorry for pretending that didn't have consequences. Her breath caught. Just slightly. That's new, she said. Don't get excited, I replied. It's seasonal. She smiled. Then opened the door and stepped out, closing the distance the glass had been keeping honest. Up close, I could see the life she'd lived without me. Lines earned, not borrowed. Strength that didn't need my approval. Take care of them, she said, glancing toward the house. Your son. His wife. I will, I said. In my own flawed, overpriced way. She reached out, touched my arm. Briefly. Merry Christmas, Daniel. Merry Christmas, Susan. She got back into the car, started it, and drove away without looking back. No drama. No music cue. Just tires on snow and a story that finally knew where it ended. I stood there longer than necessary, then turned and walked back up the hill. Inside, Emily was waiting. My son stood beside her, tense, protective, hopeful in the way only children can be about their parents. She's gone, I said. Emily searched my face. Did she get what she wanted? I think we both did, I replied. My son frowned. Which is? Clarity, I said. It's overrated, but it lasts. Emily nodded slowly. I believe you. That surprised me. For now, she added. Fair. Later, after they'd gone upstairs again and the house settled into a quieter version of itself, I sat alone by the fire. The tree blinked, still smug, but less judgmental now. Maybe it was learning. I didn't feel redeemed. Or punished. I felt present. Exposed in a way money can't fix. I raised my glass. Not in celebration, but acknowledgement. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, for the first time in a long while, nothing was knocking at my door. The house didn't sleep that night. It pretended to. I know this because neither did I, and houses like this mirror their owners. Expensive insulation, thick walls, silence you can hear. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, I stopped trying and let myself wander, wrapped in a robe that cost more than my first car and did absolutely nothing for my dignity. In the kitchen, I found Emily. She sat at the counter with her phone face down, a mug untouched, posture straight in the way people get when they're holding something together with discipline instead of hope. You're awake, she said without looking at me. I'm old, I replied. We nap. We don't sleep. That earned a breath of a smile. Not quite a laugh. A ceasefire. I poured coffee. Strong. Bitter. The kind that doesn't pretend to be comforting. She told you the truth? Emily asked. She told me her truth, I said. Which is the most anyone ever really gets. Emily nodded. I read everything she sent. Even the parts you don't know about. That got my attention. There were more messages? I asked. Yes, she said calmly. Not accusations. Patterns. Date. Names. Enough detail to make it feel researched. I leaned against the counter. She's thorough. She's hurt, Emily replied. That usually improves focus. We stood there in a quiet that wasn't hostile anymore, just alert. I didn't marry you for your money, she said suddenly. I know, I answered. You would have negotiated better. She huffed despite herself. Progress again. But I didn't marry you for your integrity either, she continued. I married your son because he's steady, predictable, kind. She turned to face me. You are none of those things. I've always felt that was my charm. I'm not joking, Daniel. I know. She studied me like a woman evaluating risk. Not emotional risk, structural risk, the kind that affects foundations. I don't think you set out to hurt people, she said. But I do think you underestimate how deeply you alter their trajectories. That's a generous way of calling me careless. It's a precise way, she said. Careless implies ignorance. You're selective. I smiled thinly. I choose momentum. And leave debris, she replied. Fair. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. My son, moving in his sleep or waking into worry. He'd aged this Christmas. Not dramatically. Just enough to notice. Emily followed my gaze. He thinks this is about you, she said. And in a way it is. But mostly it's about me deciding whether I want your shadow in my marriage. That sounds ominous. It's honest. We stood there, two people who hadn't chosen each other but were now forced into proximity by love for the same man. It was oddly intimate. I won't undermine you, I said. I won't interfere. She tilted her head. You don't see it, do you? See what? You already interfere, she said. Just by existing. I laughed softly. I've had that effect. Later that morning, late by civilized standards, early by mine, we sat around the table like a fragile truce had been signed overnight. My son looked from Emily to me, trying to read the room like it was written in a language he hadn't studied. Are we okay? He asked. Emily reached for his hand. We're awake. He blinked. That doesn't answer. It's the most accurate answer, I said. He sighed. I knew I shouldn't have come. You should have, Emily said gently. We needed to see this. See what? She smiled, not unkindly. Where you come from. That stung more than it should have. The rest of the day unfolded carefully. No explosions. No revelations. Just conversations with rounded edges. Food reheated. Snow falling like it had nowhere else to be. Claire texted once. Hope you survive. I replied, define survive. In the afternoon, Emily announced they were leaving before dark. The roads, she said. The symbolism, I added. She smiled. That too. At the door, she hugged me. Brief, firm, adult. I believe you can change, she said quietly. I just don't need to wait around to see it. I nodded. That might be the healthiest thing anyone's ever said to me. My son hugged me longer. Awkward. Earnest. He smelled like my aftershave and regret. Try not to implode, he said. No promises, I replied. But I'll aim for contained damage. They drove off, taillights fading into white. The house exhaled again, this time with relief. That evening, I finally sat down in front of the tree with a drink I didn't need and a silence that felt earned instead of purchased. I thought about Susan. About Claire. About the women whose names never made it into stories because they didn't fit the arc. In the third-person version, this would be where the old man resolves to do better. I didn't resolve anything. But I did something unfamiliar. I stayed. I didn't distract myself. I didn't reach for the phone. I didn't plan my next acquisition or exit strategy. I sat with the discomfort like it was a guest I'd invited and couldn't unseat. The tree blinked. Less smug now. Almost curious. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, for the first time in decades, I wasn't moving forward or backward. I was just here. And that, I suspected, was going to cost me more than money. The problem with staying is that eventually something asks you what you're staying for. Morning arrived without ceremony. No knocks. No revelations. Just light sliding across the floor like it was testing the room before committing. I made eggs I didn't want and ate them standing up, because sitting felt like an invitation to think too hard. Around 10, the phone rang. Not my cell. The landline. I stared at it like it was a museum exhibit. I hadn't plugged that thing in for emergencies. I'd plugged it in for nostalgia. For the illusion that if someone really needed me, they'd know how to reach me the old way. Apparently, someone did. Daniel, a woman said when I answered. Professional voice. Calm. The kind that charges by the hour and never apologizes for it. This is Linda Cross. I'm an attorney. I represent Susan Miller. Of course you do. Yes, I said. She asked me to call because she didn't trust herself to be restrained. That's wise, I replied. Linda didn't laugh. She wants to formally close a matter involving a trust. That got my attention. I don't have any trusts with Susan, I said. No, Linda agreed. You don't. She does. Silence expanded. She named you as the original beneficiary, Linda continued. Years ago. A contingency, in case something happened to her before she stabilized financially. I leaned against the counter. And she amended it yesterday. Removed you entirely. I waited for the punchline. None came. She asked me to inform you, Linda said, because she thought you'd appreciate the symbolism. I did. I hated that I did. Thank you, I said. For the call. There's more, Linda added. She donated the remainder. To the shelter your former partner volunteers at. Claire. Of course. After I hung up, I stood very still. Not because I was shocked, but because something old and brittle inside me had just been relieved of its job. Susan hadn't wanted money. Or apology. Or leverage. She'd wanted me to know she no longer needed a contingency plan named Daniel Harper. That hurt more than any accusation. I went outside and walked until my breath fogged and my knees complained. The mountain was quiet in that way that feels earned, like it's judging you but politely. Halfway down the path, I stopped. Because there was a man standing there who hadn't been there a second earlier. Early 30s. Well-dressed but trying not to look like it. Hands in pockets. Smile rehearsed but not malicious. Mr. Harper, he said. Daniel. I was hoping to catch you alone. I charge extra for that, I replied. He smiled wider. Ethan Ross. I work in asset management. Family office side. Then you're lost, I said. This is personal territory. That's exactly why I'm here, he said. I waited. I'm advising your son, Ethan continued. Not financially. Strategically. That word again. Everyone loved strategy when they meant fear with a vocabulary. On what? I asked. On what happens if you don't, he said. Step back. Reframe your role. Prepare. For what? For the reality that you're no longer the center of gravity. There it was. I laughed. Loud enough to startle a bird out of a tree. You tracked me down on a mountain to tell me I'm old? To tell you, he said calmly, that your presence creates instability in systems that are trying to mature. That's a long way of saying my daughter-in-law doesn't trust me. Ethan didn't deny it. Emily is thorough. Yes, I said. So I've heard. She wants boundaries, he said. Formal ones. I looked at him. Really looked. He wasn't threatening me. He was offering me a way to save face. You're very young, I said. So let me explain something. Boundaries only work if the person on the other side respects the reason for them. And do you? He asked. I thought of the landline, the trust, the house. Yes, I said. I think I do. He nodded. Then this will go smoothly. He handed me a folder. Light, polite, devastating. I'll leave you to enjoy the holidays, he said. When he was gone, I didn't open it right away. I walked back up the hill, each step deliberate, like I was relearning a gate I'd abandoned years ago. Inside, the house felt different. Less impressed with me. More honest. I opened the folder. It wasn't a lawsuit. Or an ultimatum. It was a proposal. A restructuring. My involvement limited. My access formalized. My influence diluted. They weren't cutting me out. They were preparing to function without me. I sat down hard. In the third-person version, this is where the old man realizes the world doesn't revolve around him anymore. That's not quite right. What I realized was worse. The world never had. It had just been polite enough to let me think it did. That night, I poured a drink and didn't finish it. I stared at the tree and finally understood why it had annoyed me from the start. It wasn't festive. It was patient, waiting for me to catch up. I woke to the sound of the wind pushing snow against the windows. The kind of snow that doesn't apologize for its volume, doesn't care about your plans, doesn't negotiate. Outside, the mountain wore white like it had a secret it wasn't telling anyone. Inside, I had the same. I didn't move immediately. I let the heat from the fire warm my back, the whiskey from last night warm my thoughts, and the silence do the thing it does best: force reflection. The folder from yesterday sat on the counter. I hadn't touched it. I didn't need to. The papers were polite but firm, formal but flexible. A map of boundaries drawn with ink that smelled faintly of consequences. I let them lie. Then a knock. Not the polite, anticipated knock of the caretaker or a messenger. Not the snow-plastered arrival of my son or Emily. This was different. Softer. Insistent. Familiar. Claire. She stepped inside without waiting for permission. I didn't stop her. Some things you just let happen. Good morning, she said, her tone careful, amused, like she had rehearsed it for 22 years and still improvised. Morning, I said. Simple. True. I didn't offer coffee. She didn't ask. That, too, was familiar. She looked around, glanced at the blinking tree, the folder, the scattered mugs. You've changed the house, she observed. Or maybe it's just listening more carefully. I let it, I said. She sat in the armchair across from me, posture alert but relaxed. I heard about the messages. Yes, I said. They arrived like mail you didn't want but couldn't refuse. Claire chuckled softly. You've always had a talent for surviving chaos elegantly. I've survived, I said. Not elegantly. She studied me. Her gaze was kind but sharp, like a scalpel held lightly. You've learned what matters. Some things, I admitted. Other things still need reminders. She nodded. And some things you'll never fully learn. That wasn't criticism. It was acknowledgement. I poured 2 whiskeys, neither particularly generous, both deliberate. I handed one to her. She accepted, turned it in her hand, didn't drink yet. You stayed, she said quietly. After last night, after the chaos. Yes, I replied. I stayed. And Emily, she asked. I gave her a brief version. Careful. Neutral. Not the gossip, not the accusation, just the fact. She's wise, Claire said. You would have been a mess without her. I didn't argue. I had been a mess. The whiskey helped, but only so much. We sat in silence. Not uncomfortable. Not forced. Just two people who had lived decades apart and found the same room again. The snow pressed against the walls, indifferent and thorough. I wanted to see if you'd choose differently, she said suddenly. After all these years. If solitude was still your plan, if money was still your shield, if pride was still your weapon. I chose differently, I said. Not because I suddenly got better, but because I didn't want to be alone in the same way anymore. Not this year. Her hand brushed mine. Lightly. A question, not an answer. And you'll survive what's coming? I think, I said, I'll survive better. Less alone. Less afraid. She smiled. Real. Slightly ironic. Good. That's enough for me. The third-person narrator would probably note that the old man had found redemption. That he was reconciled with the past. That the future was open. I wasn't thinking about narration. I was thinking about moments. Short, precise, imperfect. Moments that made you feel alive and ridiculous at the same time. We didn't speak again immediately. Just listened to the snow, the fire, the tree blinking like it understood it had done its job. Later, my son and Emily returned. Quietly. Civilly. Nothing theatrical, no grand declarations. Just presence. The way family shows up when it knows the rules have changed. I watched them settle into the house without me needing to intervene. And for the first time, the house felt like it belonged to more than just me. That it could contain stories I hadn't written, people I hadn't controlled. Claire rose to leave. I'll let you finish Christmas your way, she said. Not alone, but your way. Thank you, I said. For everything. The past, the reminders, the honesty. She stepped toward the door. Turned back once. You're capable of more than you think, she said. Then she left. I closed the door, leaned against it. The tree blinked once, twice. Then steady. Watching. Patient. I poured another whiskey. This time I drank it. Slowly. No messages. No instructions. No expectations. Just snow outside, the fire inside, and the rare, sharp clarity of being present. Later, my son nudged me. Dad. Yes. You'll be okay? I looked at him. At Emily. At the blinking tree. At the empty spaces where ghosts of the past had once pressed themselves insistently into the room. I will, I said. Better than I expected. And for the first time in decades, Christmas didn't feel like a transaction, a performance, or a trap. It felt like a gift. Not the kind you wrap. Not the kind you can buy. The kind you survive, understand, and, finally, keep. Outside, snow fell quietly, unrelenting. Inside, the house was warm. The tree blinked, amused. The fire crackled. And for the first time in a long while, I let myself be entirely, unapologetically, home. The past was acknowledged. The present was alive. And the future, unwritten, was no longer something to fear.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and stay with us for more.